Hello everybody, it's Jen. Today I'm using the Tropical Squidgies from Stampin' Bella. These are rubber stamps. I had been going through my stamps and realized summer was almost over and I hadn't used these adorable little squeegee kids yet. So I wanted to make sure I made some cards using this image. So I decided to pull out my Tim Holtz Distress markers to do some watercoloring. I hadn't colored with them in a long time. There goes Piper across the screen. So I pulled them out. I'm just using some very cheap watercolor paper. I picked this up at Target a couple years ago and just wanted to kind of use up what I had in my stash as I am out of all my Canson watercolor paper, which is my preference for watercolor paper. But really you can use what you have. So the trick with distress markers is to make sure that you use layers and that you let the paper dry in between adding additional layers. So you can see me here jumping around the image, putting one layer down, letting it dry, and then coming back over it with the other colors I wanted to use. So the great thing about the Stampin' Bella images is that they come with a colored example on the packaging. So I have the packaging over to the left of me, and I'm using that as a guide on how to color up these cute little girls in their pineapple and coconut costumes here. And it's great because it just takes the guesswork out of stuff. So if you just want to do some coloring and you don't want to think about things too much, this is a perfect way to do that. And that was kind of how I was feeling on this particular morning. So for the glasses here, I'm using cracked pistachio as the lightest color, and then I'm bringing in some peacock feathers because I knew that I wanted to use the peacock feathers distress ink for my background. The reds are barn door for the first layer, and then I'm going to do some shading with it with fired brick. And then the browns are walnut stain, brushed corduroy, and what's the other one? Just have them all here with me. Some vintage photo. And for the little pineapple, I'm using spiced marmalade for the orange color, mustard seed, and wild honey. So for the black, I find black and red are often the most trickiest to use. So I'm just using a very light shade for my first layer on the sunglasses, and I'll come back and I do that I think 3 times before I'm finished. So I'm just using the spiced marmalade there with a little bit of the orange color, and I did put that on the coconut as well. And then I decided to try something different. So I'm using for the skin the tattered rose, but then I brought in some Victorian velvet, which has a little bit of a purple hue to it, but I thought it would be good for the shading and maybe make it look like they're a little bit suntanned. I like the way it turned out, and I would try that again as some shading for flesh tone. I do like the tattered rose for the light skin tone as well. So just continuing to work up on the shading here, I felt like she lost a little bit of the yellow in her blonde hair. So I'm using some mowed lawn for the first layer of the pineapple crown. And then I believe I used some peeled paint and some forest moss, and then for the bright green that I bring in at the top, I'm going to use some twisted citron to really brighten that up. And here you can see I keep going back and forth on the skin, and here's where I'm using the fired brick on her glasses and the flower just to add some shading to that red. Now the red did leak a little bit, so I found that the skin tone under her glasses got a little bit messy, but I was able, I think, to fix it a bit with the blush that I'm going to be putting in. So here I'm just adding a little bit of brown to the pineapple just to give it some shading, and here's where I come in with that forest moss and then the twisted citron here just to brighten up the tops of the little pineapple top. So we're going to add another layer of the black for the sunglasses. And if I wasn't filming, I probably would have waited a little bit longer in between adding layers. You can see the paper is starting to pill just a little bit, but that's okay. I think the thing with watercoloring is that it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see there's a bit of pilling here under the sunglasses as well, but if you leave it and let it dry, you can wipe it away with your fingers, the little pieces of paper that come up, and you can't tell. So now I'm going to work on the card panel, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment, which is "You're the Pina to my Colada," which I think is absolutely adorable. I love everything about this stamp set. So I'm going to use my VersaFine Black Onyx ink here, and I'm going to stamp it up a couple times. And I love this ink for crisp sentiments in particular. It is a waterproof ink, but I'm going to be bringing in my clear embossing powder to emboss this so that it will resist any of the coloring that I do for the background. So I'm going to heat emboss, and you'll see me, I switch between heating it from the front and heating it from the back. When you heat from the back, it will help with the warping, so I'm just trying to make sure that I can keep that panel as straight as possible. And now I'm going to work on the background. So I was really inspired to do this background by Amy R. of Paper Prairie and Ink. She had gotten her Distress inks out recently, her oxide inks, and was playing around with a background similar to this. And so I thought this would be a great technique to try. I've done something similar to this in the past, just not as much layering in the coloring. And I really love how it turned out. I wanted to use the peacock feathers because I felt like it could mimic kind of like water and give it that tropical feel. So I started splattering, and then I realized I wanted some distressing, so I ended up lifting that up and then spraying with my Distress sprayer. Now I'm going back over with the leftover peacock feathers here to do some splattering, and then once I get that cleaned up, I will dry that and let that sit. And then off camera, I used my shimmer spray just to give that a nice shimmer look to it. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of cheeks to my cute little squeegee girls, and I feel like they look like they've been out in the sun and turned out really cute. So I'm going to fussy cut them out, and I am going to leave a little bit of a white border. So I'm using my scissors, and then I am keeping the scissors stable and moving the paper around the scissors, which gives it a nice clean finish. So I'm going to adhere my panel now onto my card base, and I just cut this out of the same watercolor paper. So this is a standard A2 size card, a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I used lots of ATG adhesive here. I wanted to make sure that that panel was going to be straight on to that card base. I'm going to pop up these little girls on some foam adhesive, and then I'm going to stick them down, and I absolutely love the way this card turned out, and I'm excited to send it to some of my girlfriends. I actually made 6 of these at one time. I just felt like doing some watercoloring, and once I got started, it was easy because I already had everything out. So I hope you guys enjoyed this card. I'm holding on to summer for as long as I can here in Canada. The thought of winter just, So the fall is definitely in the air, and these little girls helped me hold on to summer just a little longer. So thanks for watching. Bye.